are listening to the Persistence Mastery Podcast to give your communication skills the clarity edge with your host, Paul Leon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to focus on transforming rejection into resilience. This is not a topic that I actually is just in theory. Unfortunately, I know this topic by heart. I've lived it, and so many of us who are going to listen to this have lived this experience as well. In the pandemic, COVID-19, I had applied to over 350 jobs, and I got 350 no's in a row. Now, and it was also an intense time. I had 2 kids and a wife, and I had gotten laid off, not fired, laid off due to the pandemic's reasons. And it was a pretty intense time. But when I was looking at that 350th rejection, I remember I had to step back and say to myself, what needs to change? And with the unemployment money I had, I took a couple $100, paid a resume writer, got a cover letter template, and then I started cold contacting out after every application. Now, in that last 50 applications, I got 45 rejections. I got 5 interview processes started, and I got 4 competing offers. So what was the difference? The difference was timing. See, when it comes to building resilience, we have to understand that timing sometimes is a variable as a part of it. And that's really tough to hear, because if I were to ask you, how long are you willing to wait to win? I don't think the answer would be in scope with reality, because I know my answer wasn't in scope with reality. Most people, it would be yesterday, now, etc. And I want to tell you this because the first thing in building resilience through rejection is you have to understand that number 1, it's about timing. And then number 2, it's about, and let me just harp on this point a little bit longer about timing and why it's crucial and why it's important before I go to my next point. I actually had the opportunity to connect with a good friend who came back into my circle. His name's Dominic, and he's an incredible individual. He went through something pretty intense where he experienced a tough time in his job where it ended up bringing him back. And he was so thankful for that experience because in that conversation with him, the one thing that stood out to me, he said, Paul, I never had any bad blood ever throughout the entire time. And when I came back, I was welcomed with open arms. And I heard that, and I thought there's so much value in what he just said that I hope you didn't miss it. He said he never had bad blood for that company when he went through that rejection. He said, I never had time to be mad, and it's just not healthy. And that's very important when it comes to timing, because there's some things that are out of scope in terms of timing, and it's something we can't control. But here's the good news. Point 2, you can control, and that is the law of numbers. Yes, I had 350 rejections. Yes, I had 45 more. But did it matter that I had over 350 rejections when I got the yes? No. So the second point is play the law of numbers. See, if you had 2 proposals out, okay, and one of those proposals said no, well, then it would feel a lot harder, and technically on paper you have a 50% rejection rate, which is a lot. Now, let's say you had 100 proposals out, and 20 of those 100 say no. More, but now the percentage is less than 30%. See, when we play the law of numbers, what works in our favor is the law of probability of success. See, I never cared about a no. I only was looking for a yes. Let me say that again. Never cared about the no because I was only fishing and looking for the yes. And if somebody told me no, that's okay. I never wished them ill. I never said anything or negative about their family. And that's tough to do because I think at times it can feel personal because you put yourself out there. You write that cover letter. You write that resume. You write that email. There's so many touch points. And it feels like a slap in the face when you don't even get an interview. But here's the thing. It's not about you. It's about them. Let them deal with their process. Let them try to figure out that maze. Here's the reality. Something that has stayed with me recently, I heard on this Dream System podcast. The most qualified person doesn't always get the job, and the most qualified person doesn't always have to win. See, if you want to go after that next book, that goal, that initiative, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be persistent. And I think part of the reason I started this podcast was I learned that I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the biggest in many things I did. But I could get up again no matter how many people told me no. No matter how many people said you weren't good enough, you're too big, you're not smart. I could get up and I could just let it go off the other cheek. I had this nickname at Verizon called Teflon Leon. Let me say that again. Teflon Leon. And I thought it was kind of funny. I had that nickname. And when I did CrossFit, when I was 350 pounds and lost about 150 pounds, they used to call me Peterbilt because no matter how long the workout was, which was a truck, Peterbilt trucks, I could get up and keep trucking along. And I really want these first 2 points to stay with you, where it's about timing and it's about playing the law of numbers, because you have to also do this third exercise. And this one is going to require some work on your part outside of the law of numbers. If you are struggling a little more mentally tough, or it's hard after every rejection, this third one is for you. It's called an alternative assumptive exercise. Let me explain. You're going to want to open up a Google Doc, Word Doc, whatever tool you use. And on the left side of it, you're going to want to write whatever that negative assumption is you have about yourself. So it could be, I'm getting rejected because I'm not smart. Now, I hope you're not saying this, but let's just go with that horrific example. But let's just say you went with that. I'm not smart. Well, on the other side of the paper, you have to write something completely opposite of it. So if you wrote, I'm not smart on the left side, you're going to want to write, I'm growing my intelligence through this experiences. And then the next one could simply be, people are not picking me because I'm not good at interviewing. Then on the right side, you say, I'm learning from every interview and how to articulate better answers. So when the right opportunity comes along with the right timing, I'm going to crush that interview. You see how powerful that second one is over the first? But here's the thing. If you don't write it down on the left side, the negative, on the right side, it loses its impact on you. And this is something you're going to want to read every day. And even after you get on the other side of that success, you're going to want to keep going even further. You know, again, when you look at so many stories, one that always I liked recently was, in 1985, Steve Jobs was ousted from Apple. That's a pretty massive setback. But he went on to then come back, create Pixar, which became a massive success. And he eventually had Apple acquire next and then return to the job. So don't ever feel and this is an important one as well, that it's just happening to you. It's not just happening to you, it's happening to us. And as leaders and as people who are trying to develop persistence in our day-to-day sales path, manager path, we have to remember that when we're working with a team, and I've said this before, you don't have a team. You get to work with a team. You just happen to have the title of manager. At the end of the day, that's the facts. So, really lean into today's episode. It's important. I'm reading all this stuff about Intel laying off 15,000 people, and these CEOs are getting these crazy exits of millions of dollars, and you can read that and you can go, see, and we're in an election year, and there's just so much big emotions going on, and there's so much impacting. But don't forget that there are other people that are suffering rejection. And you might be one of those people, or you might be one of those people fortunate enough to be on the other side of this intense situation, still be able to hold your head up. And I think that's great if you're on that side. Whatever side you're on, here's the thing I want you to do after you take all of this content. And my hope for you is that it had impact on your ability to stay more persistent, more in the game, more strong as you move along. Reach out to one person. Just one. And just simply say, just checking in on how you're doing. Something I've believed in a long time to do. And I'll tell you where it stemmed from. I would do a lot of follow-up calls in this one job where I was a sales manager. And there would be some Fridays where we had called all of our leads, it felt like. And we'd followed up multiple times. And we had nobody to call this one Friday. This is where it came from, this idea. And I looked at my team and I said, let us all together look at our pipelines in the CRM and let's call everybody who we haven't heard from in 90 days after already purchasing with us. And all we want to do is just check in on them. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. Like, why would we do that? We could clean up the database. There's so many things. Organize our books. I said, you'll have time for that, but just take 1 hour, all of us. And let's just call people in our CRM who are over 90 days, already purchased. We have no agenda. We're just making what we call rapport-driven calls. And we go to call, and we actually generated over 30 quality referrals from doing that. I'm not telling you to do this in the hopes that you'll get business, though. I'm not telling you to call someone and check in on them in the hope that you can build a relationship to get something from them. That is not what I'm saying. My call to action and why I want you to do this is because it's going to separate you from the pack. But what if they don't pick up? Not your problem. What if they ghost me? Not your problem. We can't focus on what others do. We have to focus on what we do. There are still people to this day that I text and call who I haven't heard from for 6 months. And my wife looked at me the other day and she's like, doesn't that bug you? I said, nah. Because if they need me, they need me. And if they don't, they don't. But I'm still going to check in on them. So take the time to apply everything in this episode to take rejection and turn yourself resilient. You know what makes you truly resilient? Is when you can separate yourself from the pack, though, and focus on rapport, because so many people don't. So many people ghost. So many people simply forget. Be better.
Thank you for listening to the Persistence Mastery Podcast. Subscribe to where you listen to podcasts. And if you want to hire Paul to train or speak for your team, visit persistencemastery.com and fill out the request training form.